Okay, 721ers. This is, well, it's the beginning of week 6, but this is week 6 of your course. So, 29th is the deadline, right? It's the 19th today, so 10 days' time, you have a deadline on phaser. It's 1 o'clock in the afternoon now, and you need to submit an assignment. So, what's in that assignment? Well, what you've been doing so far. So, you've been making a metal detector, right? And you built that in the lab. So it's just a little number exercise I was showing Mike. So you've been making a metal detector in the lab. Most of you have got it working. If you haven't, we feel sorry for you. We'll get it going for you. But you really, really ought to be moving on to your PCB design if you're not already doing it. Now that PCB design, it's the same circuit as the metal detector, and the circuit, so I'll put the circuit on there, and that's what you've got to put on a PCB, right? You know how to make a PCB, we've done it before, and you've got the GLAs and another member of academic staff over there helping you do that, right? So the report is everything, so why did I even bother, you might ask yourself, soldering up an electronic circuit? Well, because we wanted you to have hand skills. You've all got hand skills, you can all do it, so that's great. I'm not going to give you any marks for that because that's not really academic as such, is it? It's more something that you need to be able to do if you're going to get a job in that area. Okay, so where do the marks come from? Well, assignment 1 specification, you can see there. And you can read that at your leisure. But let me just summarise what I'm looking for inside there. And we come back to, see if it comes back. I know you can't see this on the video, but I'm on the coursework page of the 721 Moodle. We're not worried about assignment 2 yet. And the first thing we want to look at is the guidelines for grading, right? So this is where the marks come from. So you can see on there, engineering technical reports have the form abstract. That's the abstract. Why do we have an abstract? An abstract is designed so that anyone who picks up your report, which they will do when you go out into the workplace, you'll have people looking at formal reports that you've made. Now they want to know straight away whether this report is for them or whether this report is irrelevant to them, and that's what the abstract does. This report tells you about the design and implementation of a metal detector using a simple transistor amplifier and blah 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 blah. You get the idea. So it's really high level information, nothing about how it works, nothing about any details of that at all. Documents the design and implementation of, and I don't want to see this in your report by the way, because these are my words, design and implementation of a simple metal detector which we got working from first principles. That's what your abstract looks like. Introduction, what happens in the introduction? Well, inside there, a little bit about what a metal detector is. It's fairly obvious, it detects metal. But what is it? What is it? Roughly, how does it work? Well, you create a magnetic field, and by having a piece of metal in it, it's going to disrupt the energy that you're putting out as it comes back. So you're going to see slight adjustments in the signal, and that's really what you're trying to detect. So the introduction part is just, well, what is it? The abstract is about what is report about. Next thing on there is the main body. Now don't call it the main body as people have done in the past. The main body is the type of place that you then describe your experiment. So we use multi-sim. Guys, we use multi-sim and we use Altiboard, and using those two tools we designed this circuit. That's where you'd start maybe being a bit critical of multi-sim and multi-board, the things you liked, the things you didn't like, and so on. Any of the issues that you might have encountered in the design and construction, I suppose that's really where you're going to start to discuss things like you used an NPN transistor, but you didn't use the one that was recommended on there, or you tried several other transistors, that kind of language. The ways in which you perform the testing, so construction, testing. How do you know it worked in multi-sim? Make a PCB, yeah, sure, but how do you know it worked? Well, I discussed whether you could break that circuit down into three obvious points, right? You've got the switch on the right-hand side, which switches in the buzzer on the LED. You've got the part that makes a sine wave that's sent out through the coils, and you've got the other part in there which is kind of the low-pass filter and rectifier, so it creates a DC level that goes into the final detection stage. I'm not going to tell you any more. If you've got your wits about you, you'll find that circuit, because I pirated it off the web, and you'll find that there's a perfectly good explanation of it anyway. Okay, and there's nothing wrong with doing that, as long as you reference it. So main body, construction, testing, all that kind of stuff. Conclusions. We had a nice time, Lab 8 is great, Dr. Woods is super. Yeah, well that's all true, but it doesn't really get you anywhere technically, does it? So what were your conclusions? Didn't really matter what transistor you used, as long as it was an NPN transistor. The circuit from building it in the laboratory seemed to be incredibly sensitive to the number of turns. It was very easy to get the diodes around the wrong one. Why is there a normal diode in there? Why is one of them germanium? Zener. Why is one of them a Zener diode? So these kind of arguments. Another conclusion might be that the circuit, as you were given, wasn't particularly ergonomic to hold in your hand. So it's just a little square thing with a battery hanging off the side. So clearly it makes sense to make something which holds in your hand that the battery integrates to naturally. That kind of discussion. Okay? Discussion of whether you managed to simulate it, whether it worked in the simulation, that kind of thing. So conclusions are, well, high-level conclusions. So what I want to know, so now I've picked up your report, I know it's about a metal detector, I want to build a metal detector. So then I'm probably going to have a look at this. It doesn't mean much to me yet because I'm not really in the full flow of it. Next place I go is to the conclusions, and I say, well, is this an easy circuit to build? Is it a hard circuit to build? What sort of range does it have? How could it be improved? All this kind of stuff. So that's the order I might myself look at a paper. Maybe that first, maybe that second. And then if I'm still interested in the content, then I'm going to start browsing further in. And you'll find that's what most scientists do, which is why we have reports in that format. References. A reference can work in your favour, it can work against you. If you cut and paste something directly from Google, we get it as on the plagiarism engine, we'll get it. And it's somewhat mitigated if you quoted something and it's in double quotes, and you've got a citation next to it. So references down the bottom, citation is where you call it in the main text. Provided you've got that citation in there, it's rather difficult to do you for plagiarism. But then also what that means is if you've got lots and lots of stuff in double quotes, you haven't written anything, because it's just other people's writing. So, but it's normal in any report to have references and citations, and typically a report of this size, 8, 10, something like that. Try and avoid URLs, in other words web addresses, but it doesn't matter particularly for something like this, but if you do something a bit more technical it will matter. Appendices. Pen's running out. Appendices. is, that's the sort of place, because you have got a page limit on this, and if you look at the instructions on there, I've given that to you as well. If you want to include things like data sheets, are particularly useful. So if you want to include the NPN transistor data sheet, or a photograph of you winding the coil, or a photograph of your circuit, or something like that, that's the kind of place that you can find that inside the appendix. Okay. What else have we got? So this is my marking scheme. Actually what I've got is I've got a marking grid I use, but this is the breakdown of those marks. So this is cast in stone for this module. So looking on the board there, I'll just see if I can blow that up a little bit. Just stretch this way. At least I can see it now. So you get 10% for what the report looks like. That's normal. It's normal to award marks for that. Latex is particularly good, but probably most of you don't use latex yet. So make it look nice. Obey the rules, citations, sensible headings, numbering, make sure your figures are labelled, make sure the tables are labelled, all that kind of stuff. Circuit diagram, we can cut and paste that, so I'm not going to award many marks for that, right? References, citations. So you want that full 5%, I want 10 references in there, then you can have that 5%. PCB layout. Now, that's really an art form, isn't it? So, you know, have you set out to align all your resistors in one particular way? Have you set out to make it fit your hand perfectly? Have you taken into consideration that when you push the metal detector out, the coil's usually going to be at one end? It's that kind of stuff, okay? So, the way in which you've tried to design that PCB to house those components. Or have you just gone for full miniaturization, so your whole circuit is absolutely tiny, okay? Publicity, now this throws everyone, and I get asked about this regularly. All I mean by publicity is photographs of what you've done. So, in other words,